key metric of intelligence is how much energy do we expend to achieve a desired result. Obviously, low ends of intelligence would be spending massive amounts of energy to achieve the opposite of the desired goal, and high levels of intelligence are spending little or no energy to achieve the goal. And of course, the highest level of intelligence is when we know what the right goal is, which generally boils down to facilitating enhanced sustainable well-being. In that context, I spent a month asking the question, what is the least amount of energy that I could spend to create the maximum result? And the most fruitful aspect, other than encouraging Westerners to have less children, was the idea of leveraging app technology to create 10x lives, 10x cultures, and to facilitate massive amounts of sustainable well-being with very little energy expended, because it costs somewhere in the neighborhood of a few $1 million to develop the app that I'm going to talk about, which can be leveraged planet-wide. And it takes literally pennies in electricity to leverage that app on the trillions of dollars in infrastructure that exist in all of our smart and web and computer technologies. So let's look at the question, how could we design an app with the sole purpose of creating the most amount of sustainable well-being for the most people with the least amount of energy consumed? And so the individual is at the center of this project, and we're looking at the individual's highest return on investment. And in this case, it comes through synergizing cooperatively with lots of other individuals. And so I want to start with the platform upon which to leverage all of these different ideas. It begins with no advertising. Every person who spends money to promote something has an agenda, and that agenda often diverges from the truth. And so simply eliminating advertising such that all data presented is more neutral leads to better decision making. Blockchain technology minimizes corruption and manipulation from governments, intelligence agents, and the like. Metadata, particularly filtered through encryption and blockchain, allows incredibly high volumes of sensitive data that an individual might not vote to have known about them, to be known about a country, to be known about a region, a state, a county, a species, the southern hemisphere. And so metadata is key to leveraging data because in the data or information age, the most powerful thing in the world is accurate data, using the formula that accurate data leads to more intelligent decisions, with the highest intelligence being represented by the creation of the most amount of well-being per unit of energy invested. So metadata that is successfully delinked from the individual through encryption and blockchain provides a tremendous amount of relevant, clear patterns in cultures and communities, etc., to deal with reality without the overlay of fear and political correctness, which occur in direct proportion to the level at which a group is sociopathic. So there is a degree of sociopathic reptilian behavior in every community around the planet. And to the degree that that exists is to the degree that telling the truth is dangerous. But not telling the truth is severely problematic for making effective decisions because people are making the decision on faulty data. And so having metadata gets around that issue. Having it be a global app, not controlled by any government, a nonprofit global app, and in such a way that the coding and the set of almost like the Bill of Rights and the Constitution of the United States, that the coding is such that no individual can tamper with the follow-through of principles and the constitution of the app upon which a majority of people votes around the world. User votes and thanks are an important, sifting process. And so if I read an article on a quest for increase in some area of well-being, and well-being is achieved efficiently, then I'm going to upvote that article. If I read a post that is inspiring and leads to more well-being, I'm going to upvote that post. And if I have an interaction with someone on the basis of competency, and that person demonstrates high levels of competency, I'm going to upvote the levels of competencies that I witness and thus vote for that person's competency in that arena. I also want to give thanks as a motivation of gratitude to let people know what they're sharing and what they're producing on the app that is valuable to me. And so being able to give thanks, or in exceptional cases, incredible thanks, maybe where there's a limit to determine quality, where you can give 1 star a week, for example, for the most valuable thing that happened all week. And you've just got that one. And so there's an encouragement to think, as opposed to the inflation that is possible in places like Facebook, where you can have an infinite number of friends and not know any of them. It's incredible inflation, meaning there's no value to friendship on Facebook, because you can have as many friends as you want with one click, and it means absolutely nothing with no obligation. Introducing this sense of limits that encourage thought and respect for the votes that are given, I think, is quite important. Trust metrics around competencies are one of the most powerful things that can emerge out of this app. As an example, I've never cheated on a partner or friend or lied to a partner or friend sexually or otherwise. Now, that's a very specific trust. As someone with Aspie-type tendencies, I've made people incredibly uncomfortable. So if the goal is comfort, I may not be the person. If the goal is telling the truth as understood, I might get top notches for that. So differentiated trust is, I think, one of the most important things to measure. Because in understanding who should be in a more leadership role or dominant position for a given project or goal, the first thing to understand is, what is the goal? The second is, what is the role? What are the roles needed to fulfill that goal? Next comes, what are the competencies needed to play the role? Once that's been identified and people's competencies are measured through ongoing, hundreds and hundreds of interactions. This person always relies on time, and they never know what the hell is going on. So if it's delivery, give it to them. If it's summary of the key points, they might get a 1 out of 10, And so this breakdown of competency from the people who have experienced an individual over time, I think, is incredibly important. I also think it's very important to include a wider variety of people, because nature produces incredible ecologies of varieties and anomalies, in the understanding that robust ecologies with diversity are guaranteed to win. The more options you have on the table, the more one of them is going to win. And so it's very important to have a very broad vocabulary of trust. This person can absolutely be trusted to make everyone furious by the end of dinner. That is a particular talent, and there may be the odd occasion where that talent is useful. For example, that person must know on some level, unconsciously or consciously, what every person's hot button is at the table in order to press everyone. Well, that's useful to know. If you want to know your blind spots, that's someone who knows them because they need to know them in order to press them. And if they don't know that they know them, but they press them anyway with absolute reliability, well, then you know that if you really want to know what you're upset about in your life, just spend 20 minutes with this person, and you'll be furious, and then you'll figure out what you're furious about. And so, at any rate, there's a tremendous need to get away from "that's a good guy" or "good, solid, salt of the earth person," which means absolutely nothing, and into detailed, nuanced profiles of what individuals are good at. And obviously, every talent or trait has a positive and negative potential. Mapping out which, many things that are culturally atypical would get condemned as, for example, in the United States, being too sensitive, being too emotional, is a cultural condemnation, a cultural shame. In a rather chauvinistic culture, feminine traits are denigrated. But this is not to say that being highly emotionally attuned and sensitive is always negative. It's just viewed that way in the U.S. But it might be highly viewed in another context. And so it's very important to break out of the cult mode of judging and really see who individuals are, and then pair people who are good at particular things with the projects that require those talents. Then we have biometrics to establish identity and minimize fraud, whether that's fingerprints or iris reading or facial recognition. I think it's important to minimize the ability of robots and, governments, et cetera, to infiltrate, this system for, political or profit ends. Being nonprofit and being open source. Being nonprofit is just basically saying that obviously any project needs a certain amount of money to be self-sustainable, but the goal is not to make as much money as possible. The goal is to provide as much well-being for the members as possible. And if there's a use of capital that is voted on as being highly valuable to a group of members, then they can fund that project. Open sourcing simply means that anyone can build on this infrastructure, just like anyone can submit an app for Android. Anyone can submit a feature or a subset of functionalities for this kind of core platform. And then as people vote on how much well-being that feature brings, other people who are looking out for new features to add into their experience of the app can click to add in that bit of code to their user experience. So this being the base, which leads to a virtually unlimited set of possible uses, what are some of the things that I think are quite relevant? Well, one of the things that I think is very important are nuanced profiles about an individual. For example, when I hire a housekeeper, I have a daily list of chores, a weekly list of chores, a monthly list of chores. And then I have to do a tour of the house, which I could do on a video or in person. And then I want to get, their data sheet. So I might, have a profile for house cleaner in which I update that, and anytime I update it, any current or future house cleaner will get that update. And it might include, the ad that I put out for a house cleaner, etc., the house rules, all of that. And then if I have a house cleaner, I would share that profile with the new house cleaner, which instantly gives them access digitally to all the data, needed. So that would be, for example, an example of a profile. A romantic profile. This is the level 1 new dating profile. This is all that I want a new date to know about me. I want them to know what my diet is. I want them to know what my age is, my religion, blah, blah, blah. This is what I want someone to know about me once we've decided to be sexual, a sexual profile. This is what I want someone to know about me if we're looking at getting married, and what I want to know about them. And so we can build these profiles as an act of self-awareness, as an act of empowerment, and then choose when, where, and with whom we share how much of these profiles. So we control the data is, the most important thing. Health profiles to be able to share with, whether it's a therapist or a doctor, etc., the things that we believe are most important for someone engaging with us in this way to know about us. A masseuse profile, I want you to know what type of massage I like, this, that, and the other. Here it is before my appointment. So profiles in childcare, financial profiles, a list of things that I'd put together. Anytime I want to get a bank loan, I'll send this file of this, etc., etc. So profiles of talents, profiles of competencies and qualities, profiles in trust, project profiles, things that I'm working on and what role I'm playing and have played, goals, architectural profiles. I want the landscaper to come fix my irrigation system. So I might have a detailed utility profile that I would send off to the landscaper. And what does it have? It has every photograph that I have of where the utilities are. It has maybe a video going through the irrigation system. Here it is. Now, if I have a landscaper working on that, I want them to update my profile as part of the job by taking a new photo of a pipe they repaired, of how they repaired it, of where they've run wiring. I want that updated as part of my profile and nuanced so that I can go into electrical or water, irrigation, house line, fire, and find all of the relevant information and share it with a click of a button to anyone on the planet instantly over this platform, or download it into a PDF to email if someone isn't on the platform. So that's the profiles, and I want to be able to also clearly state what information I want public, for someone browsing or in this category, in this category. So we come over to facts, and this is a very important kind of segment in the age of quote, fake news. In arguments about facts, it's useful to have as many data sources as possible. An eyewitness that said this, a recording of this, a this that said this, a this that said this. And what the processor can do is sift through the supporting and unsupporting facts to give a probability factor. You can say that this fact seems 70% probable, 98% probable, etc. And anyone who has any information about that fact can add it. And the algorithm can keep track of their competencies and trustworthiness. Someone who lies all the time and works for advertising companies as a career, etc., in their profile, may get a 1 ranking of weight when it comes to their version of things. Someone who's everyone says has never told a lie that anyone has ever seen might get a very high ranking if they said they personally saw something. So there's actually a weighting to get to the probability of the most likely version of facts for people who want to see the most controversial facts of the day being debated in a more technical sense, based on evidence and statistics as opposed to just he said, she said. Social compatibilities, collaborations, encrypted communication, relationship building algorithms. You know, one of the things that's very useful is if you kind of connect with someone via this app as a possible date, well, there can be a first date building app or a first date building protocol where you send them the information about your diet and favorite first dates, and they send you yours, and you look at connecting points, and here's a way to build a first date, and how does this sound as a nice composition? And you send it off, and you both agree, or you negotiate, and then you go on a date that's really meaningful. After the date, there might be 3 questions sent to both people. You know, do you like to sleep spooning or separately? You know, like I've often liked falling to sleep totally not touching someone, but like to cuddle before bed. What do you like? These things going back and forth and prompting intimacy, prompting into me you see, prompting development of awareness, so that your relationship stays alive and interested and flooded with relevant data to succeed. The other thing that I think is very important, given Dunbar's law of 150 people, is to limit your intimate community of friends and people that you want to spend to less than 150 people, so that you have to pick 150 people in your virtual community. Now, this could be people, your neighborhood and your actual community. Or if you're nomadic or whatever, still 150 people tops. Because beyond that, you have inflation and degradation in intimacy, according to studies about human relationships. So keeping your group, who belongs to your group, if you add someone has to be let go of, and a protocol of perhaps honoring a relationship and saying goodbye, etc., in order to connect with something. But I think this is a very important part in building quality relationships. Banking, as we go into the age of cryptocurrencies and digital trading, there are still a lot of people who are spending high fees. Like I spend probably about $10 a transfer to send money to Thailand by PayPal to pay rent in Thailand. There's no reason for these things. There's just tremendous amount of it's an uncomfortable experience. It's unnecessary. It's expensive. So having free transfers, essentially, being able to keep a balance and share it with people. I think hiring and payroll is a big enough thing, and there's so much hassle around giving someone a gig, around partnering around something. And it's so easy when you're dealing with an app that has over 1 billion people on it. It's so easy to do your location for one person in that city and region or whatever to figure out all the payroll taxes, all the laws, etc. So that if you want to pay someone for something, the app will say, oh, that's in this situation, if you send more than $2,000, that it has to be taxed, and then this is the tax rate, and this goes to this party and this goes to this party. So basically having a nonprofit bank that allows for payroll, legal transfers of money and taxes and stuff in all the ways, so that all you have to do is meet someone and say, hey, let's do business like this and like this, and the legalities are ensured and up to date, with this global app infrastructure. And if there are fees that cost to update that data as opposed to, trying to extract as much money as possible. And blockchain accuracy for accountability. Yes, this person did get this money, et cetera, et cetera. Potentially expanding into a government corruption accountability where taxes are paid into this system and every dollar can be tracked for every individual for every purpose in the blockchain. And contracts are a very important thing around personal agreements. I'll pick up your child at 5 p.m. And then this and this and this, and I'll give you this, but you pulled up using GPS fencing at 5:30, and then my daughter wasn't there, and then this happened and this happened. These types of, this is the contract and this is what actually happened and this is the way that these circumstances will be handled. Having good contracts that are voted on by people because they work, they build trust and friendships rather than break them down, is an incredibly valuable resource in sustainable relationships. Medical data. So what symptoms you have, of course, what medicines and treatments you've tried, which ones have worked. See, because what the algorithm can do in the gathering metadata is it can notice a trend that would take years to come out in the medical community. It can say, you know what? 98% of the time, white people living in Arkansas who are male, who show these symptoms, benefit from this. And 42% of the time, this would be a good treatment for people in Marin County, California, who have this types of situation. It can notice significant corollary trends. And these can be helpful or dangerous depending on the intelligence of the algorithm. But it might be nice to know that 98% of the people in your age group with your diagnosis who took this medicine felt a lot better. When the people that voted on 1 to 10 how much did that medicine help and for how long had no financial or advertising agenda, they're just people like you and I. So statistical data, stories. Anomalous data get lost in these aggregate data collections that get passed on. And so it was pointed out in one of the books I just read on medicine that you might say you've got 3 months to live on average, and you do. But what might be very interesting to know is what did the person who lived for 20 years after that 3 months do? And what did the person that died in a week do? You might want to look, and how often does someone live for 20 years with a 3-month diagnosis, and what do they do? Where do they live, and that kind of thing. These are stories that can be gathered in metadata that could be incredibly interesting to someone looking to beat the odds of average. And what are the lifestyles of the different people in these situations? What are your own trends? So updating your own trends, etc., is an important way in feeling empowered, feeling in control, to see how you're doing physically, emotionally, financially, etc. What's the trend and where is it leading? Successes and failures. I tried this, it was a disaster, and I'm in this demographic and this demographic. And you don't have to enter this all again. Once you've got your profile, and the metadata understands that you're a 42-year-old male that's white and grew up here and moved here, then it knows who to pair you with. And it doesn't have to share who you are to give data that 78% of people like this are having this result. So trends, successes, failures, tracking anomalies. Because in order for a paradigm to shift or a change to occur, or you to beat the odds, you often have to look at the anomalies. And they don't ever show up in studies because they don't fit on the charts easily. So gathering out those anomalies. Upvoting articles relevant to your particular issue. Obviously, if you say that you have cancer, you want to read the most upvoted cancer articles. If you don't have cancer, you don't. You want to read the things that are about depression or whatever it is that you're dealing with. So funding and cost analysis also, I think, is a good thing when rating any protocol for health and well-being. You don't just want to hear it was a 7 out of 10. If it cost $1 million and was a 7 out of 10, but something else cost $5 and was a 5 out of 10, well, the value is much higher with the $5 5 out of 10 than the 7 out of 10 for $1 million. Art, sharing, voting ideas, funding ideas, being able to do global art projects. Maybe a kite that is the biggest kite in the world that flies around the earth, or things like that. Global art projects that celebrate the species, which smaller art projects can tie in with your 150 people, as part of your intimacy building and your poetry, etc., a really close-knit group, but also global art projects that otherwise would never happen and without this level of collaboration. Then we have voting. One of the things we have in combative political processes, we have a lot of leading questions. Do you want to kill black people? No. Therefore, you've got that you just voted for this. You want to, as much as possible, depolarize and just look at what are the questions that reveal what an individual actually values. So a good way of communicating that is, this is my value, this is my desired goal, and this is my preferred strategy. Now, this is really important because you get into a situation where in a democracy, for example, people will vote for something they don't actually want because they think what they don't want will win, when what they actually want won't win. Now, it's very important for such people to have metadata about what will actually win. So in other words, if you have 78% of the population voting for a compromise because they think what they really want can't be gain a majority vote, but the metadata reveals that the majority of people actually do want that, then they can switch over from the compromise and vote for what they actually want and win. And so neutral questions, values, goals, and strategies, gathering data around the world, meaning if the goal is I want less children raped, if that's the goal, and you put that as your primary goal for a given policy, then you should read articles about the places in the world that have the least amount of childhood rape and look what they're actually doing as opposed to just your hypothesis of the best way to get there. So data around the world, voted articles relating to anything you're voted on, meaning if one article pleases, if nine out of 10 people read this article and say that it was highly informative in making this vote, that would be up at the top of the list of things to read before making a vote. Metadata and shared data, again, being optional. Metadata being mandatory, shared data being optional. And reported votes by officials. So you say, this is what I value and this is my goals. And here's the strategy that I'm recommending. Well, the app can tell you which officials of any party, it doesn't matter, voted consistently with what you're wanting the most, and which kept their promises the most. If they're saying they will vote this way, based on track records, what percentage of their promises, when they have the discretion, do they keep, and all that. And so that would be voting, and that would give a profile of what a country really wants, what its women want, what its men want, what its young people want, and not limiting this by age. Countries may limit a 14-year-old from voting, but you'd still be able to see what the 14-year-olds of a country would actually like to see happening in their country. Well-being data, health, environment. So how good is your health? Mentally, emotionally, physically, logistically, financially, and ecologically. Like, is your country planting more trees or cutting more trees down in the last week, in the last month, in the last year? Is your country cleaning more water or polluting more water, and by what amount per year? So measuring these things as trends, etc., is really important, because in order to create maximum well-being, you need to have accurate data. So health, environment, human needs. One of the most valuable things that a country or city or a family can know about itself is how well each person is dealing with their human needs. Now, Abraham Maslow developed a hierarchy, so we have survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, developing personal gifts and talents, bringing those out into the world, and being a part of something bigger than ourselves, to be transcendent. Now, it's a huge deal to know that 5% of your people in your city are not in clear survival. They're uncertain about survival. Or maybe 50% of your city feels lonely, does not have more than a 5 ranking of love and belonging. Well, if half of your population feels lonely, and it is a human need to feel love and belonging, then you know what your city needs to deal with. Not new roads, but new dance structure, new dances, new rituals, new social gatherings facilitated, and maybe rather than building a new police station, you build a community center and hire people to heal loneliness every single day until your city's loneliness goes down and your love and belonging goes up. So knowing the human needs of every demographic and tracking it on a weekly basis, just by sending each person a questionnaire weekly, how you doing on survival, love and belonging, self-esteem. These were your last readings. Have any of them changed, 1 to 10? And then just click submit. Now we have a census of the most valuable data about well-being on the planet, which is how well each human being is meeting their needs. Knowing what are pain points. What are the biggest pain points for the most people in your city, in your family, in your country, in your region of the globe, as a species? Because if the biggest pain point is lack of trust and fear of being punished by an autocratic authority structure, then we have something to respond to. So knowing pain points, support options. So if I'm in pain and need support, or if I have an opportunity and need support to realize the opportunity, how could some specific person help me? So they need to meet this criteria as a person, and they need to do these things to help me. These are what those are, so that the people in our community know how to support us efficiently. What are the highest returns on well-being? Meaning, if I've just started a yoga program and suddenly my well-being shot up 25%, or as in my case, when I bought my dog, my well-being shot up 20%. Understanding, nationally and globally, what activities boost well-being and the return on investment. How much time does it take to care for a dog, to go to yoga, to meditate, to do whatever? Suggestions. Having the app suggest things, meaning if I say that my love and belonging is 2 out of 10, well, that's mediocre. So the app might suggest, here are 3 bingo halls to go play bingo within your region, if you said you liked gaming and those are the only games going on. Here's an online community that likes to sew and discuss politics while knitting. While doing a Zoom video conference with 20 women knitting and discussing democratic politics. Well, and it happens every 7 p.m. and just log in and do here. The app can tell you things and you can just say interesting or not interesting. If interesting, it'll put it in your calendar and prompt you a Zoom call starting with knitters in 5 minutes. Trends in your well-being are very important to track, and a life routine builder. So as you gather data, one of the most important things when sharing and creating data for this platform is what's the action step. So here's the idea, here's the hypothesis, these are the people that like it. What do you do intelligently as a result of this? It needs to crystallize that into an action step. And so if you click on the action, add action, it's going to ask you, how do you want to add it into your life? Do you want it as a list of possible actions? Do you want to add it to a weekly routine? Okay, where in your week are you going to put this action? Where in your month? Where in your year? So that you have on your calendar then reminders. You build a routine and a life based on well-being. Finally, we go to global well-being projects. So here we have the most competent people in the world around certain areas. This is the most knowledgeable nuclear physicist for this particular type of subject. And there they are. Okay. So if you have a project that needs a nuclear physicist that's involving the global future of the species, etc., you know that's a good person to involve. So the top competencies in different things around the world, team building platforms. And I think a good one is goal, project description, set of roles, description of what each role would involve, the list of competencies, and then people can self-populate and be voted in and out of roles by people based on their trust metrics and different things and their performance. And so top competencies, team building, global funding of different things. For example, asteroids have come up as a big thing, and kind of annoys me to understand that, it's one of the top 10 problem issues that could eliminate the species, and no government is really tackling it. Well, I might put $20 towards the asteroid fund, and so might another million people. Well, that's $20 million. And $20 million might set up a few drone-based, asteroid detectors. Who knows? But having global volunteering and global funding for global well-being projects is very valuable. What is news? One of the fun things traveling around the world is you realize that what's news in England is not news in America. And what's news in America isn't news in Canada. What's news in Canada isn't news in England. So you realize they're talking about the world, but they're all picking little bits and random pieces. They don't let you decide, because ultimately news has become entertainment to sell advertising. Is it really relevant that a bus went off a hill in Bangladesh if you're miles away and you're not going to do anything about it? So what is relevant? What is news? What do you want in your news feeds? How much news do you want? What is news? And what's really important news? What do you want at the top? What format do you want your news in? Audio, video, written, what format? And the dosage, so that you don't overdose on news. You get a warning you're overdosing on news. But also maybe you want 15 minutes of news a day on anything urgent in your 150 friends is number one on your list. Any health issues relating to your job, number 2 on the list. Foreign exchange rates between Japan and the US dollar is the 3rd on your list. And you pick your news. And then you get unbiased, unadvertised news populated based on that. Education. Moving towards a completely free global education, having the best competencies and the best knowledge based on voting, trust, and competencies put into this curriculum so that anyone in the world can read this in any number of languages. So best voted resources, focus on 80-20 summaries. The 80-20 principle, you get 80% of the value with 20% of whatever it is you're doing. So you get 80% of the value of your education with 20% of your hours and 20% of your subjects and 20% of your reading. So trying to find those 80-20 summaries. And users can put data forward and put that out there and it can be voted on with the goal that anyone who wants to could get a pretty decent education about how to read, how to how to do this kind of mathematics, how to develop a business, how to save money on taxes, whatever it is, that they could get a decent education in that subject, and that people are always upvoting the most relevant things for a specialized area of that subject. So it's a real democracy, but you can read as much as you want, but you'd probably start with what's upvoted. So this is, the kind of the initial outline of an app where 99% of the value of the app comes from large amounts of people generating the metadata and the formats in which to do it. And having a key fact that the protocol for interacting, one's interaction with the app at every single level, is voted upon by every single person. So you might have multiple skins, so to speak, for dealing with this app. You pick your favorite color, you pick your font, you pick this, you pick, everything about the app. And you might also pick, you want this before this. Making that as customizable as possible, number one. And number two, having people vote on the experience and make suggestions. And where all the suggestions are public, and where the most repeated suggestion is gathered by the algorithm to say these are the top most important ways to improve this app this month. And these are the resources and things needed to do those improvements. And if those include money, then particularly the members who voted for the change, do they vote for the change enough? When you're voting for a change, and understand that it takes energy to make the change, you can put a dollar amount of how much you'd be willing to pay if that change was made. Well, if it turns out that 300 people really want this new feature and everyone is willing to put up $1, so that's $300, and adding the new feature costs $3 million or whatever it is, obviously you understand that that's why it's not happening. But it's a democratic process, and anyone who wants to volunteer to make it happen and do the open source coding can make it happen. But where that is completely transparent, with no agenda other than this, meaning the people that sit on any board or governing body around this public nonprofit have to be accountable to their users for one thing and one thing only. The users saying that as the app is used, it is delivering high amounts of sustainable well-being for the users, and that it's getting better. So you want to see a rate of return. There should be a goal that this app delivers more sustainable well-being to its users by at least 5% a year, meaning the app going from being off the app to on the app should give a 10x improvement, meaning you should be able to improve your life 1,000% on average if you really utilize this app relative to the average person. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, whatever it is that you're doing that's so your life maybe got 300% better when you got on the app. Well, it should make you 305%, 310%, 315%, or whatever better every year. There should be a goal to show what competent leadership looks like. And there should be someone scouting around for the best opportunities to grow the ability of this app to create massive amounts of sustainable well-being for the species, for the planet, for each of us. And that's my big, hairy, audacious goal.